Hello everyone, Creative Fun here, back again with another video. And as you can see, we are once again in the Mirage 2000C. Currently, as of recording of this video, Eagle Dynamics is having a huge sale on aircrafts, and I got the idea from looking at a couple of Facebook posts. A lot of new people are currently purchasing or coming into and getting familiar with the Mirage 2000C, and I figured I'll make a little bit of an introduction to the Mirage 2000C cockpit and startup procedure. I haven't done a video like that, and I haven't been able to find a good YouTube video that shows like the cockpit familiarization and the startup procedure in one fellow swoop. So I think this will be a nice little addition to my Mirage 2000 series tutorial. If you're new to the Mirage, which I assume if you're watching this video, please check out some of my other tutorials I've done before. So let's jump into the cockpit. So here we are in the cockpit of the Mirage 2000C. I've activated my track IR, which allows me to look around the cockpit quite comfortably. So let's just get familiar with the cockpit and where you can expect to find the different types of instruments you're looking for. We're going to start down by the right side, move our way up, around, and then all the way back down to the left side here. Now the Mirage 2000C is actually quite a simple layout cockpit in my opinion. It is designed initially to be very easy to learn, which of course makes it a lot easier for us flight sim nuts wanting to get used to this aircraft. We have the engine panel here, very simple. Different types of lighting in the cockpit, follow there. We have the countermeasure panel. This starts the countermeasure panel. Most of these are working perfectly, but you can leave these at default most of the time. We then have navigation systems here, which type of navigation mode and so on. We have the ILS and the VOR navigational beacons, as well as the TACAN, followed by electronic countermeasures and electronic defensive systems, as well as countermeasure program. A little bit confusing that some of the countermeasures are down here and some of the systems are up here, but still pretty easy to remember. This is for the RVR and so on. Then after here we have the IFF panel. Don't forget to turn on your IFF when you start up the aircraft, very important. And on the top here we have the INS panel that allows you to perform simple stuff like entering and navigation waypoints, planning your route, editing and so on. So everything in regards to navigation system you can find here. Moving further up we have the warning lights panel. The best thing is that if all these lights are off, leave most of these buttons in default. This is the battery switch. So we're going to move up to the right top panel here. And once again, the layout here is very simple. There's not much to it. You have the fuel panel here. These lights will come on depending on which tanks are empty. The middle one here is the the external tank, and the outer ones here, left and right, are you have the possibility to add large fuel tanks on the wing. So this is the wing fuel tanks, and this one here in the middle is the centerline external fuel tank. So once any of these lights up, that basically means that that tank is empty. So you have your fuel gauge here. The left one here tells you how much fuel you have internally, and the right one is your total fuel. Let's see here. These things are best left by default. Don't mess with these settings here. This will tell you your thrust, and this will tell you the percentage of current thrust from your engine. Another engine panel here. I believe this is the temperature, engine temperature panel, so it's good to keep an eye on that. Moving further on here, this PC, this lights green when the afterburner is on, so that's also good to know. To the left here we have the RVR. This is your G meter, and this panel here is the HSI, so this is your heading indicator, shows your compass. There's various different types of needles here, and they do various things. You also have a select button here that allows you to change navigation mode, so please have a look at the more comprehensive navigation tutorial to figure this one out. And bottom here we have the bomb and weapon panel that allows you to set up certain parts of the weapon system. This panel here, which I'm highlighting with my cursor, is the bomb panel. So this is where you set your bomb release quantity and so on, and your arm button. Don't forget to arm your bombs before you drop them. There's a few other buttons here related to weapon selection. I'm not going to go into too much of that. This is basically a weapon selector and a bomb panel. Moving on. Front here we have the HUD, of course. We have some HUD buttons, buttons related to the HUD, and they are radar altimeter. So you set up your radar altimeter on this right side here, and you set up your targeting, manual targeting, as well as some other features for the HUD here. And you can turn on the HUD or turn on the backup HUD system with these switches down here. Down here we have the heads down display, which is basically your radar display with various functions. I'm going to move my joystick a bit here. You have a bunch of buttons here. A lot of these buttons here is not modeled, so you can ignore this panel, button panel below the radar. On the left side we have a lot of information pertaining to your flight status and also a weapon select panel. So the first thing here to take a look at is your angle of attack meter. The green line here indicates angle of attack for when you touch down, so that's a good thing to keep an eye on. Do not exceed the angle of attack here. You have your radar frequency buttons as well as your autopilot system here. These are buttons that you use to engage the autopilot with. This panel here is also part of the autopilot function. You can set autopilot hold. Moving along here we have a climb or descent button, or button I say, dial I mean. So this will tell you how many feet per minute you climb or descend. You of course have your horizontal indicator and your backup horizontal indicator as well. And moving on, you have your altimeter as well as your airspeed. Most of this information is displayed in the HUD, so you will very rarely need to use these at all. You have the barometric pressure though, however, you can set here, and I do believe you set it with this button here. Further down we have the weapon select and also a special mode select buttons. And these pertain to the special modes that the Mirage can be set to in terms of navigation, landing, and so on, as well as selecting your weapons. You select your weapon on your down panel and your lower panel here, and you select your modes in the upper panel here. And you of course have a button and a digital panel that tells you that adapts current depending on the situation. This is the master arm switch, and you have a button here for jettison stores, as well as your gun button. You have a very nice clock here to the side here, which should show the correct time. So this little box here is part of the countermeasure suite, tells you amount of electronic chaff and flare you have, and whether you want to set it to auto mode or not. I do not know if the auto mode is simulated yet, but the most use I get of this is basically telling me how much chaff and flare I have left. Moving down to the right panel here, we have landing gear button and air brakes indicators. These two are very important. If they glow yellow, you have your air brakes out. So you also have your gun arm and your fly-by-wire disconnect button. This is the button that you can change from air to air to ground mode, that limits the G forces that the aircraft allows you to do. Very good if you're dropping bombs or carrying heavy stores that needs to have your aircraft's G limited so you don't tear them off the wings. This little button here is really nice. It resets your trim. So if you trimmed your aircraft due to dropping or firing some missile and your aircraft is imbalanced, then you rearm and you want to retrim your aircraft, pressing this button will trim your aircraft. This is the radio panel and all the switches and buttons related to the radio. Up here we have different types of lighting. So this revolves basically the external lighting of the aircraft. Moving down here, let's see if I can move this like that. We have, of course, the throttle. This is the button to store the throttle again. So if you pull this one back and press the button, this will shut off the engine and store the throttle in its off position. Once you move your throttle, you cannot go back to the off position without starting this one or pressing this one. Here we have a series of buttons relating to the radar. So basically everything here is related to radar operation, different types of radar mode. This is volume control of the majority of the volume switches of the airplane. Over here you have the engine in-flight start switch. Good to know where that is. And over here you have trim buttons. Moving a bit further down, we have systems pertaining to the autopilot, the fly-by-wire system. The most notable of this one is the fly-by-wire test switch here that allows you to extinguish one specific light in the warning lights panel. So let's start this aircraft up. We're not going to use any external sources. We're going to start this aircraft up internally with its own fuel and capabilities. So first course of action to start this aircraft off is, of course, to flip the battery switch. Once you've done that, you are free to adjust a couple of the lighting switches here. This one will adjust your lighting of the actual panels. You are able to turn on some flood lighting, I believe. You can see lighting there. We do not require any flood lighting right now because, well, it's very bright outside. We have the sun right there, so no need to mess with that. Once I turn on the battery, we are gonna pull the start lever here. We're gonna flip a couple of switches here. So generally you just want to flip all of these switches which pertain to the fuel pump system. Once that is done, check that the throttle is in the off position. Press the engine start. You will then obviously hear the engine starting up, and you will wait until it spools up and reach 11%, and then you will throttle up, then throttle back down again, and put the throttle from the off position to the idle position, and the engine will spool up. As the engine spools up, it's going to be a little bit noisy in the cockpit, so we are going to close the canopy. I do that with Control C, and you can bind it to whatever button you want. Now I've turned down the volume for the recording, so you might not hear the engine starting up, but trust me, it's starting up. And as you can see, the aircraft is coming alive very nicely. Once the aircraft is fully started up, we will continue with the procedure, but as you can see, just getting the engine up and running is very, very simple. So our engine RPM is stabilizing, and you can see the thrust the engine is currently outputting here. We're going to close the engine start hatch here, and then we're going to move up. I generally prefer to turn on some of the cockpit lighting. So here is for the main panel, and then the side panels here. Makes it easier to see all the buttons regardless of the lighting conditions outside. I'm going to ignore completely this. We don't usually need to push or change anything in this setting here. However, we're going to move this one and press to nav. Now, if you need to align your navigation system, depending on how you've set up your mission, you want to align it first. Please look at the tutorial in my tutorial series. I have a specific tutorial on how to set up and align your INS. But generally, most missions and the configuration of the Mirage will not require you to align. It will be pre-aligned. So set it to nav. You don't need to touch this button at all. We're going to move up here, and we're going to push a couple of switches on the side here, just to flip this all. You should hear a beeping emergency sound. That's totally fine. Just press this warning button here, and that is done. By the way, this is the master warning light. Always good to know where that is. We're going to move up here. We're going to turn on our electronic countermeasure systems and electronic warning radar receiver. This button here is for the jammer, and we'll set the different statuses of the jammer. Do not forget to switch this one on. This is the switch to turn on your countermeasure systems, and then you can select the program here. Very important to keep turn on your countermeasures. We don't want to mess too much with IFF, but we really want to turn the IFF on before we do anything else. That's also very important. We are now done with this panel here, and we're going to move up here, and we're going to just double check a couple of stuff. First, we're going to turn on our headstone display here, and by clicking on this one, not on the test one, but actually clicking down here, you can have a check of your stores and see what type of weapon systems you currently have equipped and how much ammunition you have in your gun and so on. So it's very useful to check that everything is armed and ready. So it's a standard left click and you get this up here, very useful. Moving up, we're going to turn on the HUD. And we do that by right clicking. Right now it's very bright outside, so it's a little bit difficult to see the HUD. Just trust me, the HUD is on, everything is working fine. If we want to, we can also set up our radar altimeter, and we do that first by switching this button here to M, and then setting this one to SELH. And that gives us a couple of symbols here. This gives us a symbol for the radar altitude, which obviously should be 0 now since we're on the ground. And then the second digit here is for when you want the radar warning to, or a radar altimeter warning to sound if you're flying too low. So you can set this by scroll wheel here, and as you scroll down or up, you can set the minimum allowed altitude before the radar altimeter warning will sound. So on this side here, there's not much we need to do. We do, however, want to turn this one on here to auto, and this will give us indication of how many chaff and flare we have in our ornament, or what we're equipped with. Moving down here, we're going to turn on some lights. These are the exterior lights, and this is the taxi light. If you turn them up full here, there are two settings for each exterior light. Well, bright and more bright, and then you have the taxi and then landing lights. As you can see now, our aircraft is glowing nicely with the formation lights, navigation lights, and the strobe. Moving down here, we do absolutely want to also turn on the radio. So we're going to do that, and this is these two switches here for the UHF and the VHF radio. And you can see the frequencies are set there. Since this is not a radio tutorial, I'm not going to go into how to set your radio, but you can absolutely change the channel with these two buttons here. So moving down here, we do want to put our radar into standby. The heat up period is a couple of minutes, so it's always good practice to put this in standby immediately, so it's ready to go once you take off. Now I don't want to move my throttle too much, because then I will throttle up and then start rolling here, and that's not what you want to do right now. However, if you want to set up some other parameters for your radar, it's of course fine to, if you know exactly what to do here, you can just flick the switches. The last thing we're going to do on this panel here is to open this cover here, and this is the fly-by-wire test, and we're just going to put it, doesn't really matter which direction, just flick the switch, and then we're going to have a look at this. It's going to turn off the decal warning lamp as soon as this one turns green here. So we're going to wait until this one turns green. It just takes a couple of seconds, about half a minute I think. There, it's green, and the decal lamp goes off there, which is perfect. So that means our fly-by-wire system is working perfectly. So we reset the switch and we close the hatch there. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you start up the Mirage. I hope this tutorial was useful for you, and I hope that you are a little bit more familiar with how to start up the Mirage and what type of instruments is currently in the cockpit of the Mirage. Last thing, of course, do not forget to turn off your parking brake before you start taxiing. I have done that. I have forgotten to pull down my parking brake time and time again, and I throttle up and the aircraft doesn't move and I get upset. So to avoid getting upset, don't forget to put down the parking brake.